Hey guys, Terry Red here, and in this video, I'm going to be doing basically a simple walkthrough or demonstration and maybe explanation of FizX, the new physics system for Future Pinball that was recently announced, and it's a total game changer for Future Pinball for many years. Since 2010, Future Pinball has kind of been locked into the same old cruddy physics that it kind of had. It was never the best physics in terms of realistic physics. Uh, and then eventually BAM came out years later, which gave us pretty much almost full access to all the settings in Future Pinball, without it doesn't hack Future Pinball or it doesn't change Future Pinball, the actual program. It adds to it and allows us to have more access to it to dynamically change things or add more stuff to it and modernize it in ways that no one thought was ever going to be possible. And it's just amazing what BAM has allowed to have happen. And JLou, who had some experience with visual pinball, decided he wanted to adapt nFozzy physics techniques to work with Future Pinball to greatly improve its physics to be way more realistic than it was before and way more configurable than it was before. For those who don't understand, nFozzy physics is a technique and table update to visual pinball tables to greatly improve the physics to make it way more realistic. Now, what people don't realize is visual pinball it's always had better physics than Future Pinball, but it doesn't just come out of the box with tables playing perfectly. It doesn't work that way. It's never worked that way. These amazing tables in visual pinball, the VPW tables, or any nFozzy or Roth, or even JP Salas's own type of physics. Like these guys have to completely update these tables, add items to them, add new code to it, and go through a very specific process that kind of blocks or limits what the visual pinball physics engine is doing so that this new code can dynamically update and change aspects of ball behavior and physics in the table to make it play way more realistic. It's a fine art that these guys have mastered over the years. They're really, really good at it. So it's not something that just happens automatically on visual pinball tables. I think people really don't appreciate the work that goes into that. So what FizX is doing is basically the same thing. It's basically taking these similar techniques, most of it, not all of it, and adapting the code to work with Future Pinball's Newton engine. And we do similar things. We reduce parts of what the engine is doing on the table so that it won't be able to do the crazy stuff it does. And then we add new code, dynamic code that manipulates parts of the table and the ball behavior in real time, and we add objects to it. So as an example, here's the two tables side by side. So here's the old Sonic Pinball Mania that I've created and updated, and the new Sonic Pinball Mania with FizX added to it. So if you, for example, look down at the flippers, now the flippers themselves are the same. We don't, in FizX, we don't have to, add new triggers or, new items to the flippers themselves. We just have to give them the right angle and swing angle and all that kind of stuff. But so you're not going to see a difference between the two there in respect to that. But if you look at things like the slings, for example, these are the original rubbers around the slings, and that's what actually is activated normally in a Future Pinball table. And then all you can do is change the strength and elasticity, sorry, and that's it. You can't change anything else. Whereas by adapting similar techniques to nFozzy, with the new dynamic code, we can now add new rubber elements to the posts, and you can't easily see it, but we add new, like for example, walls that are set to rubber all around. And I think this is different than nFozzy. What we do is we add two diverters to the slings so that when the sling gets hit, then the diverters both fly out, which will make the ball move in more realistic angles and behavior. Whereas before, as I'll try to show you, the ball does not act properly with normal Future Pinball physics. And on top of that, by adding this stuff, it allows us to dynamically control what is going to go on based on ball speed, velocity, and position and all sorts of stuff. And we can adjust the threshold, do all sorts of stuff to make it act the way we want. And And as far as other parts of the table, for example, the drop targets. And you can see here, we got FizX rubbers on the posts and another wall here. And so that way, the actual rubbers you see on the table are just for visuals. They don't do anything. The newer settings restrict what Future Pinball does normally to the point where the rubbers are doing almost nothing. And then our new rubbers are put in there, and then we can do as we wish with them, basically. And the same idea is done with drop targets. Now, this little thin thing here is actually the drop target that's in there. So what we do is we add an invisible wall to act as the drop target. So the wall will get hit, not the drop target, and then we control the action of the drop target, but we can also now use the new code for FizX to manipulate it however we need to, and add extra things down the line, like maybe we could make it only act as a hit based on speed of the ball. Things like that. There's so much that can be done now once you add all this stuff to the table. And then there's other aspects like adding timers and, of course, adding the new code, which I'll go into a little bit later on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try playing the normal version of Sonic Pinball Mania. I have not played this since I've added FizX. So it's been at least probably a couple weeks, I think, since I last even tested that. So this is going to be strange for me. It's probably going to be very awkward for me to play this. And I'm probably going to do terribly because now I've become so used to the newer physics, the better aiming flippers, the more realistic flippers, the dynamic actions of the flippers, that it's going to be odd. And it's hard to really visually show this stuff, in a video for physics. It's one of those things you kind of have to feel by playing it. But I'm hoping you can kind of see some of the difference when I play them both. Hopefully you'll be able to see the difference. I'll try my best. So yeah, this is going to be weird. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. All right, so let's give this a go.
So nice of you to drop by.
All right. Oh, this is gonna be so weird. Oh, of course we get the stupid, the stupid shield. Oh, okay, so that's not the best way to start because that's just gonna throw everything off. All right, I'll just kind of wait for the shield to go off. But while that's going, here I'll show you. So the flippers on Future Pinball are just on and off. Now it's going in slow motion because the shield's on. So that's not the normal speed. But with the flippers, they normally are just on and off. Like you can't dynamically just do a micro flip or anything else. They're just, okay, now we're back to full speed. You can see like they're just on off. Even if I kind of try to, do it quickly, it doesn't really, dynamically make the flipper only go a little bit on or off. It's basically full power on, full power off, and no matter where you hit the flipper or anything else, it's basically like that. The newer DF1 dynamic flipper physics that were added are better. They are better, and that's what this table is using compared to the original Future Pinball physics, but it's dramatically different with FizX. So something I'll point out is with Future Pinball, the way it normally is, the first half of this flipper is mostly okay, but not great. The second half is atrocious because when you hit the ball during the second half, the ball will not, kind of go up here like it typically would. It's going to go flying way to the side, like a super wide shot, something Future Pinball is very known for. So if I want to try to get up to here, I actually have to hit the ball about maybe halfway down the flipper to actually get it to hit up there. And that's crazy because it's supposed to be normally right around down here towards the end of the flipper. So let's just try. I'm going to try playing a bit and see how bad I do. So, oh my gosh. Oh geez. That is so different. Oh my gosh. Wow. Oh my gosh. Like I was trying to hit that right orbit. Like that is so different. Oh my gosh, man. And oh wow. Even the ball, like the way it's kind of feels, like the way it's kind of falling down and all that, it just feels like it's very light, like kind of like what some people always talk about, where it feels like it's kind of like a balloon flying around instead of a weighted metal ball, right? It just, I'm actually seeing, like, it's hard to describe this accurately, but I'm finally seeing what so many guys are talking about when they watch my videos or demonstrations or whatever like that, like, this is the first time I've played a normal Future Pinball table since I started adding FizX to a table, and this is, wow, this is nuts. So, okay, so now you can do post passes quite easily on the old system, but you can't do any kind of like micro flips. Like if I try to do a micro flip, it's not going to do that. It's just going to hit it with full power every single time. So yeah, the accuracy is so different on the old system, and I'm just going to use ball roller to demonstrate some things. Things like the slings, for example. If you had the ball like rolling down the slings like this, during gameplay on this version, it doesn't matter where or how fast or slow the ball is going. If it hits right here, boom, that ball is just going to fly off just like that every single time. It's not dynamic. It doesn't take ball speed into consideration. It doesn't take position into consideration. And if it hits the lower part here, it tends to fly upward instead of like instead of more downward like it really should be. And yeah, the flippers are just always full power on and off, If you're someone who's only ever played Future Pinball and never visual pinball or never a real pin, none of this would occur to you because, it's just, you're just playing it the way it's presented to you, and you adapt to it quickly. And I always did, I had never had a problem with that. Even though I played a lot of visual pinball, I was able to play Future Pinball, and oh my God, I can't aim worth a shit, Oh, wow. Okay, so that's a quick demonstration, I guess, of old Future Pinball. It's just wow. Like that's not an act or anything, guys. Like wow, I can't believe how different that feels. So now I'm gonna try. Excuse me. Now I'm gonna try the current work in progress of Sonic for FizX. So I'm going to try demonstrating this as best I can, some of the differences. This is also a bit newer update of the table as well. I got extra shadows and a couple other differences, but it's going to be different. It may be hard to see the difference dramatically, but my God, when you play this, it's a huge difference. Like, such a big difference. And I will point out that you might need a little bit faster PC when playing these newer updated tables. And the reason for that is because just like nFozzy on Visual Pinball, it's using more... Well, hold on a second, I gotta turn this down. Give me a second here, guys. Alright. Let me try turning that down a little bit. So just like with nFozzy, it's using more CPU to dynamically change physics in real time. So, it's not a dramatic difference, but if your PC barely got by to run this before, it's possible it may struggle a little bit with these newer updates, and there's no way around that, guys. That's just the way it is. It's the same thing on Visual Pinball, like you'll see like newer VPW tables that come out that may use more CPU compared to the older versions, and that's because of the newer physics updates and all the other updates they do, and that's just the way it is, guys. Like, there's nothing I can do to avoid that. If you want it to play better, then that's the way it's got to be, so. All right, so I'm just going to try playing a little bit and seeing if I can, like, make certain things happen. All right, so let's see if I can... Okay, so right there, I did like not a full flip. I did like kind of like a half flip there. So normally the ball would have flown completely way up on the old system. So now if you look here, you can see like you can actually do very, very quick micro flips. So right there, like normally that ball would have been full power and would have been flying across every time. So if you have 2 or 3 balls on the flipper now, you have way better control over trying to get maybe one of them off or shoot one upward. So that's me doing a quick micro flip, and then doing it a little bit harder, it's going to do that. And then if you do a little more control, now you can do a post pass. So now I'm going to try hitting that right outer orbit compared to before, and you're going to see that I now have to hit it at the end of the flipper tip like you're supposed to with normal realistic flippers. Okay. Give me a second there. That was me sucking. All right, let's try this again. There you go. All right. So as you can see right off the bat there, there's a huge aiming difference compared to old Future Pinball. Like, I would have had that thing flying off to the side every time if I would have tried that. Like, you know, it's a huge difference for aiming compared to before. It's like a night and day difference. Like, you just can't go back. And things like, for example, live catches, you can do it. Now, I'm going to try my best to do it. You know, it's not always a perfect thing to do every time, especially when I'm trying to do it in a video. Okay, so there you go. There's one right there. You know, and you can do drop passes too. I'm not great at it, but I can do live catches pretty good. So you could never do that before. That ball would have bounced off every single time. So now live catches are a real thing. Drop catches are a real thing. Tap passes are a real thing. But it's kind of hard to do that with I'm not at the cabinet, so it's kind of hard for me to do that, you know, in a demonstration. It's kind of one of those things that will just happen during gameplay when the moment arrives, you know. So, but yeah, this is a huge difference. Now the slings is another example. The slings will react based on the speed of the ball and the place where it's hitting it on the sling. Whereas before, it would just fly off at full speed every single time you even came anywhere near the rubber on that sling. The bumpers are no longer using old techniques that we had before. And see, like, look at that. Like, right off the bat, proper aiming of the flippers. So see, I can have a little bit more control. Now you can backhand, but it's not the easiest thing to do depending on the gameplay. But I'm going to do something a little bit different here. So for testing purposes, I've built in what's called FizX Profiles, which dramatically have different settings for FizX that I can change, during gameplay whenever I want. I'm going to have to explain a little more about that later, but so right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to this profile, which has a little bit stronger flippers. So we'll try doing the same kind of shots, and you can see like now, even though it's still using the same system, now the flippers are going to be a lot stronger, which will affect everything differently. So the gameplay will be a little faster than what you were seeing before. And it's going to be both easier to play because you can, if you're used to real pins, if you're used to visual pinball, you're going to be more used to how the aiming should behave, how the flippers should behave. But it's also going to be harder because the ball is going to have a heavier weight to it now, and it's going to be a little less forgiving when it comes down towards the drain, right? So you're going to have to adjust to this. It is not the same as it was before. Like, it is very different feeling. And it's kind of hard to really show that accurate in a video, but I'm hoping you guys can see the difference. And you can see the slings are not firing like crazy. The rubbers are also not making the ball bounce left and right all over the place like it normally does. And there's just so much you can adjust now on this. Like, I'm not a FizX guy. I never have been. So I'm not great at adjusting this stuff. I can add as much as I want, no problem. But adjusting all the different settings, I'm not good at that. I'm just not good at it, So it's a huge difference for anyone who's played the old one versus the new one. And a little bit of so you can see like the live catches are, very much a real thing, and you can do them quite often, and you can actually adjust the difficulty for live catches if you want. So I have it on like probably the second easiest, so not the easiest, but the one next to that. So if you didn't want it to be so easy to do a live catch, then you can make it much harder if you want in the FizX settings, which I will show you guys soon. Now this table, my God, I hate these upper flippers. And yes, I still keep the old Future Pinball nudge in there. It's kind of like Visual Pinball 9 nudging. You can adjust that if you want so that it doesn't make the ball move that much. It's totally up to you. But, that's how I prefer it.
Such a challenging tone. The hedgehog wants to play.
And I'll just try going through a mode here. And I also fixed the ball saver. When you get a new ball and you launch a ball, the ball saver actually works correctly now, whereas before it never ever did, and I don't know how I missed that. And no one ever mentioned anything, so it never even occurred to me, so. And I'm not the best player, guys. Not even close. Like, like I don't have access to real pins very often, so I'm still adapting to this, I'm so used to old Future Pinball physics that it's taken me a while to get used to it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just kind of do a quick, show you quickly. Excuse me, sorry. So I'm going to show you quickly. We'll start from the top here. So FizX, it's pretty simple to add for the most part. You add one timer, and then you import the models for things like the diverters, the new rubber models, and that's about it so far, really. Like, we don't have to add new stuff to the flippers or anything like that. We might have better models for flippers coming in, but like for the most part, that's the only new stuff you have to add to the table. And then for me, I import all the FizX code directly to the table. Not everyone will necessarily do that. Some may use a library file or a VBS script file. I don't like doing that. Even for PinEvent, I've now made it so that it's all added to the table directly. So if you want to mess with FizX for your own personal settings, you don't really want to change much on the table. Like, something like, for example, the flipper angle, if you have a preference for that, you can change that. But then after you change that, you're going to have to go into the script and adapt the settings for what you've done here. Other settings, I would leave them as they are, because they're at an ideal setting for the most part. It'll vary by table. So you want to go to FizX settings. You go into table script. Now, this is how it is on my releases coming out. It may not be like this for anyone else, okay? So you're going to go past all this initial stuff, the blurbs, the change logs, and all that. You'll soon see the table options. That's specific table features that you can change. All my tables will have it up there. Then you'll see the PinEvent custom settings. You don't need to touch any of that unless for whatever reason you want this table to have unique PinEvent custom settings for DOF and PUP and SSF or anything else for that matter. Normally you shouldn't have to touch any of that. And then you just come down here and you'll find the FizX system starting right here, and you want to get to the table settings, this part right here. This is where the specific settings for this table are all contained. So I'll come back to the FizX profiles later, but simply put, it starts with the FizX XML settings. These are Future Pinball's basic settings for physics with the Newton engine. These are kind of like the what we never had access to before until BAM came along. And then now BAM lets us change all these however we want. Most of these we can't dynamically change, but some of them we can. But we can change it to whatever we want, and then on table startup day, get added. So that's the basic thing we start with. Then you come down here, and these are the main FizX system settings for the table. So this section here is for the flippers. They're, for now, applied to just all flippers by default. You can change up the code a little bit if you want to have each flipper be a little bit different. But normally, you typically don't need that. In the case of Sonic, I actually did add different settings for those small flippers because they're a pain in the ass. They suck. I hate them. So I had to change things for them to make them a little easier to make that medium mode shot. But you can see here, this is all the main stuff with a good explanation of all the settings for each. It kind of gives you a rough reference for what the typical defaults are, but that's not set in stone because every table is different. So you have end of stroke torque and angle, base omega, tip omega, the live catch difficulty I was talking about, swing angle. Now that's the important one. So that's the one that you absolutely have to have matching to what you have here in the table editor. So that has to match. That's the one thing that if you don't do that correctly, then you'll see some odd behavior going on. Most of this is going to be kind of good to go for adding to a new table as is. This is kind of like a preset for drop targets and for the rubber basic settings. But then this section down here is specific to the table for all the different rubber posts and walls that block all the rubbers around slingshots or plastics or anything else. So you add these yourself, and then you can individually change the posts and the rubbers to whatever bounciness setting you want, and then the code itself does its own thing automatically for scatter and other stuff. And like, I'm not a physics guy, so I'm not the best explaining all, but that's this stuff here. So you can see like if you go down here, that's the new rubber posts we add, and then we add a new wall that you can't easily see here, but it blocks all the rubbers around the plastics. So that's what all that is set up for, and that's basically it. Like, if you add everything and you copy and paste the code, you just basically come to this section here and you tweak these settings as needed. That's really the main gist of it. The XML you normally don't have to adjust, but there is something different that you may need to change, and that's what I'm going to explain now. So the Newton engine is set to run at a specific frames per second. The higher frames per second it runs at, the more accurate physics it can calculate dynamically. The thing is, the higher that's set, the more CPU speed you need. You need a faster CPU, a faster processor specifically. The video card has nothing to do with this. It's your CPU. So if you got an older CPU and you have this set to a higher FPS, it may struggle. So what I've done is, because that's an issue, I decided to create profiles for FizX settings accompanied with a higher or a lower frame rate, frames per second for the Newton engine. So that way, if you got a slower computer, you can change it to profile 1, for example, and then you would look here, 296 frames per second. And if you read the instructions here, yes, read the instructions for frick's sakes, guys, it tells you to come down to here where it says frames per second in the physics line for the Newton Physics XML settings. So all you do is change the profile you want and the physics FPS to match. That's it. And that will automatically change to a complete different set of physics settings that I've set up down here. So here's the default. Here's the default at the higher frames per second for faster computers. And then here's another profile with the lower frames per second but more stronger flippers. And the same thing but at a higher frame rate. And this can be completely customized however you want. The problem is we can change all these settings dynamically, but we can't change this dynamically. So unfortunately, if you want to change a profile, you have to make sure this is set to match it. So we can't, allow you to play the table and change back and forth unless all the profiles use the same frames per second. So if they were all 296 or if they were all 596, like, that's how the settings were designed to work with. Because once you change the physics FPS, well, then other settings have to be changed to match properly with that. So if they all had the same frames per second setting, then we could add like a whole bunch of profiles and you guys could change on the fly in the middle of a game to completely different physics settings. And that's kind of what I'm going to show you here. This is not a feature. This is something I use for testing only, but yeah. So I'm just going to get into the game. And by default, I think we were on profile 2, which is the default with higher frames per second. So if you kind of look here, you'll see, how powerful the flippers are. Not bad, but not great, right? I mean, for normal gameplay, I kind of prefer it that way because it's not super fast, right? It's way more controllable. But some people want more powerful backhands, for example. So I'm just going to show you. I'm going to toggle now to the stronger flippers. If you look at the DMD, the stronger flippers settings. Now, this is still using 592 frames per second, right? So you may notice something, you may not. So I'm just going to try this for a second here. So you can see that the flippers are stronger and the ball does kind of fly faster. And the thing you got to remember is you have to hold down the flipper longer when making shots. Because it's going to dynamically control the strength of the ball when you do things right. So it can be very, very different. Like I'll give you an example. Like I sent a copy of this to JP Salas, for example, with the default settings, and he said he loved how all of it played, but he wanted the base omega, the strength of the flipper, kind of in this part here, higher, which allowed him to backhand the ball much higher than normal. And I mean, that's the stuff you guys can do. You can go in and tweak everything all you want and make it exactly the way you want. Like it's a dramatic difference in how these things play. And I've got this one mostly tuned in for at least how I like to play it. I'm gonna include the alternate profile for stronger flippers. That may change, but I mean, it's just a huge difference overall, guys. And I'm really excited for you guys to try it out for yourself. Future Pinball is not gonna. I'm not gonna say it's gonna be exactly the same as Visual Pinball. I mean, it's not. Like they're different engines, and you're talking about years of and dozens of guys who have mastered physics settings on Visual Pinball versus a couple guys on Future Pinball that are implementing a brand new system with a completely different physics engine. So. I mean, this can only get better from here, guys. Like I'm not the best at this, but I guarantee you, my tables are all going to play so much better than before, and you guys are just going to like it so much better. Like I just can't wait. So this table will be out soon enough. I'm working on Star Wars. After that, it's mostly done. I've had some people do some early tests, but I still need to make adjustments and do some play testing and all that. I added this to, for example, Silent Hill 2, my work in progress, which I'll get back to that, but it was a gigantic difference. Like the outer orbit shot, which I friggin' hated on that table, is now properly easy to make every time, and it's totally changed the game in such a big way. So this is such a big deal, guys. For those of you who are, Visual Pinball, purists in that nothing will ever be good compared to Visual Pinball, and you just want nothing to do with Future Pinball or FX3. Well, I mean, then this is not for you. But for so many people, including a lot of guys who create tables on Visual Pinball, they know there's a lot of great Future Pinball tables out there, and they want to see them get this kind of update and play better, because you're not going to see most of them on Visual Pinball. It's been like 10 plus years and they're still not converted because it's such a huge amount of work. And on top of that, some of those tables can't work on Visual Pinball. So, having this option now to completely update every table is fantastic. It's absolutely awesome. And there's so many great tables that can now be playing so much better than before. And that's all I promise. The flippers are going to be so much better. The ball weight is going to be better. The rubbers are going to be better. Drop targets, and it's going to improve from here. You might still see some of Future Pinball's jankiness pop up. The ball may do an odd thing here and there, but it's just going to improve from here, guys. So I don't want you thinking whatever I send out with Sonic or Star Wars is the best you're going to ever see with this, because it's not. It's just going to get better as everyone gets to know it more. It's not my specialty. It just isn't, So I've asked a few Visual Pinball guys to test it out, and they've actually really liked it. They made their own changes to how they prefer it. They're not all on the same page for what they want in physics. So it's kind of hard for me to come up with one, global setting that's going to make everybody happy, when even in the Visual Pinball camp, they don't all agree with how physics should be done on a table and how it should play and all sorts of other things. So all I promise, guys, is the flippers are going to be immensely better. You're going to have way more accuracy flipper tricks than you ever had before, and the ball weight's going to be better. It's just going to be better overall, man. So, that's all I really wanted to get into. So this may be an option in my tables, the FizX profiles. It may not be, but if it is, read the instructions and make sure that the profile and the frames per second match. Here, I'll show you as an example. If they don't, you may have strange behavior go on. Certain things like lighting may run at weird speeds, or the ball may stick into a flipper because, the settings aren't correct to match the engine's frames per second that it's calculating things at. So when you see that option, please read read the instructions. You know, if your computer is struggling to run a table, make sure it's running at 296 frames per second, not 596, and make sure the profile matches, and see if it runs better for you. If it still doesn't, there's nothing else I can do for you. It just might be that your computer's just not quite fast enough to run with these newer physics, and there's no way around that. So you can see the beacon light, the orange beacon light, how quickly it's spinning, right? So if I change to a different physics, now the frames per second no longer match. And that rotation speed is based on the Newton engine counter. It's how I'm making that work. So that's one visual explanation. The bounciness of the rubbers will be a little different. The scatter will be a little different. The flipper behavior will be a little different. The weight of the ball would be a little different. So that's why I want to have those options in there. So that way you guys can at least try to adjust it for the speed of your computer if you have a slower computer, and also to try to make it work in the way you guys hopefully prefer the physics to be. But yeah, that's all I wanted to show. So I know I kind of rambled on for quite a bit there, guys, but I hope you guys are gonna enjoy this as much as I do. There's already people very excited and asking for certain Future Pinball tables to be updated with this already, and it's going to happen. There's other guys already starting to do it. It's just going to take time for all of us to get to know how this stuff works. So, very excited for this. So many people have said so many times, why do you create stuff on Future Pinball when Visual Pinball is newer? And I would argue that with BAM, Future Pinball has way newer, more modern features than Visual Pinball will ever have, and that's from the creative guy's aspect, not the pinball physics aspect. For someone who's creative, there's way more options to use. So that's why I create on Future Pinball. And now that we have the better physics to go along with it, it's just a win for everyone who wants these great tables to play better. And that's a good thing. So I've rambled on long enough. So I hope you guys do give this a try when I upload the updates soon enough. They're coming. And for those who keep asking, I will eventually get back to working on Silent Hill and Retro Flare once I've now updated Jaws, F14, and Halloween, and maybe the first Retro Flare for not just PinEvent V2, but now also these newer physics. And that's worth the wait. And then hopefully, because I suffered a stroke last year, which is why I had to take a break from Silent Hill and work on smaller projects that are easier for me to do when I'm not feeling like crap in the evenings. Because during the day, I feel horrible and I can't really do much. So hopefully when I get my heart surgery in the fall, it's supposed to happen, I'll start feeling better. And then by that time, I should hopefully have these other table updates done and I can be recovered. And then I can get back to working on Silent Hill at that time, which is going to be a huge project. So I look forward to that, and I look forward to all these tables playing so much better, and you guys finally able to enjoy them in the way they deserve to be enjoyed. So that's it for the video. See you in the next one, guys. Bye.